Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and good afternoon, those in West Africa. We are honored to have you in this conversation today, Distinct Talks, as we talk about Ghana, an election amidst COVID-19. And we are honored to have Genfi Yaw, a member of the National Democratic Congress. Genfi is a committed and dedicated member of the National Democratic Congress, Ghana's largest opposition party, who has committed his entire youthful life to championing the ideals and the principles of the party. He hails from the Ashanti region of Ghana, married with 4 kids and a devout Methodist. He wields a postgraduate diploma in public administration, a postgraduate certificate in public administration from the Ghana Institute of Management and Public Administration. He is currently a student of professional licensing in administration and management consultancy at the Chartered Institute of Administrators and Management Consultants in Ghana. Mr. Genfi also holds a Bachelor of Commerce in Business Administration and currently pursuing his second degree, a Master's in Marketing Strategy, majoring in Political Marketing at the University of Ghana, Ghana's premier university. He is a graduate member of the Chartered Institute of Administration and Management Consultants. Genfi has served both in public and private life in several positions across the last 2 decades of his working experience. And today it's a real honor to be able to host him. I know he's a very busy man as they prepare for an election that is coming up on December 7th. And NDC is a party that was founded in 1992 by His Excellency Jerry Rawlings. And there have been a ruling party before. They are now an opposition party. And interesting to note is that the current president, Nana Akufo-Addo, has already been endorsed by his party, NPP, the New Patriotic Party, to be their flag bearer. And NDC has endorsed Mr. John, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, as their flag bearer. This is the 3rd time the 2 leaders will be going into an election to verse each other. In 1992, it happened, and Dramani, Mr. Mahama beat Nana Akufo with 50.7% in the final result. In 2016, Nana Akufo beat Mahama with 53.8%. Now, we have a 3rd round in which 2 politicians, top heavyweight politicians from NPP and NDC will be versing themselves for the 3rd time. In football, this would be a deciding match for a lot of people. So I'd like to welcome and bring Mr. Genfi to join the conversation right now. Mr. Genfi, you're welcome to Distinct Talks, and we're very honored to host you today.
Thank you for having me, Emmy. And, good afternoon from Ghana.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us. And I know you're very busy. I know you have an election coming up, so there's a lot of organizing going on. But we are honored to host you today. I just want to give context to our conversation, and then we can take it on from there. And the coronavirus has taken the world by storm. Minute by minute, we are assaulted with content on the spread of the virus and its health challenges, how countries are and should be responding to prevent the spread and flatten the curve, and its immediate and future social, economic, and political implications. The virus has started spreading in Africa with varied range of responses from governments, from lockdowns to some declaring a state of emergency. From a public health perspective, such actions are indeed necessary. But what about from a political standpoint, especially in West Africa, already mired in some sort of political and security crisis, where several crucial elections are upcoming? In West Africa, 5 presidential elections are coming up. We have the one of Ghana on December 7th, we have Cote d'Ivoire, we have Guinea, we have Burkina Faso, and a first round in Niger should take place in the last quarter of 2020. So, and this is a quote coming from a writing that was done by Nadia, the program coordinator of program manager of CIAMC in West Africa. Genfi, is Ghana ready for an election during COVID-19, given the numbers we are hearing from Ghana and across the regions within the country? Do you think you're prepared to hold an election amidst a pandemic?
Well, this is a very interesting question. Ghana must go into an election come December 2020. There is no narrow way for us to escape the elections, especially when the Constitution of Ghana did not anticipate this particular situation. And there may be other constitutional means of dealing with the current situation, but looking at the nature of our politics and how Parliament is currently constituted, it will be very difficult to come to a compromise. So the only way is to hold the elections come December. And if you ask me that, is Ghana ready for the election, I would say yes. Unfortunately, there is a scare. We are currently having a national mass voter registration exercise ongoing. And that is the fear that if we don't take care by the time we get to December for the elections, there will be an upset of the coronavirus cases in the country. And that would obviously be a threat to holding an election in December. So that is what we have been pointing out to get the Electoral Commission to ensure that there is absolute adherence to the COVID-19 protocols, and also for government to scale up its preventive campaigns, and also what government can also actually do in order to help us reduce the rate of increases as we have seen. So we will have an election in December amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. We must have the election.
And there have been complaints, particularly from your party, about the preparedness of the Electoral Commission, especially their ability to be able to organize a free and fair election. How is it looking right now?
Well, this concern is deeply rooted in the unfortunate removal of the former commissioner of the Electoral Commission by this government. In 2018, there were some frivolous accusations and allegations against the Electoral Commission, who was appointed by the previous regime, leading to the removal of her from office and the appointment of the current Electoral Commissioner. Even at the time of her appointment, together with some other deputies, the U.S. Department of State came up in their annual human rights report about various countries of the world, indicated that the appointment of the current commissioner by the government was to suppress voters in opposition strongholds. So we had anticipated that the purpose of bringing in this commissioner was to undertake a new voter registration exercise, which would be done and skewed in a way to suppress the votes of our strongholds. And clearly, as events unfold, we are seeing that the plan is actually in place to suppress votes. And so going into this election, I would be lying to you if I say that the opposition trusts that this commission is going to be able to organize a free and fair elections. There are many instances where all the things that they have done point to the fact that they are really in bed with the government. And so there's that fear. But be that as it may, we ushered in the Fourth Republic. As you rightly said, the leader of our party at the time in 1992, when we had the Fourth Republican Constitution, was a member of the NDC. That's Flight Lieutenant Jerry John Rawlings. Yes. And so we have always conducted ourselves to safeguard the Constitution and not to do things that will undermine the democracy as we have built up to this stage. And so in spite of our concerns and our complaints, we try to do all things within the laws of the country and to ensure that chaos and violence do not erupt throughout the process. And that's how we have conducted ourselves so far. But of course, you know that when you are pushed to the wall and when it becomes very clear that in spite of all the peaceful conduct of the opposition and what we have done, they still want to go ahead with their plans and to change, you know, the anticipated mandate of the people to be given to the opposition party. That one, I cannot, you know, give any assurance of a post-free, you know, conduct of the opposition in terms of the election and how it is conducted. Yes.
Genfi, and I think in a recent press conference, the president agrees with you that there must be an election because the constitution requires that there's an election as it has been dated. I also know that the Electoral Commission says they have guaranteed the safety of all eligible registrants at the 33,000 polling stations across the country. The Electoral Commission has put in place the necessary elaborate protocols as outlined earlier in the day by the chairpersons when they were giving a press conference. So the Electoral Commission seems like they are really preparing well to make sure that the election happens. How is your political party preparing, given all your fears about the possibility of a collusion between the Electoral Commission and the incumbent? How are you preparing as a political party to make sure you still have the ability to win this election?
To answer your question, let me address the issue about the preparedness of the Electoral Commission. It is very clear that the Electoral Commission is not prepared. Time is against them. I doubt if they could come up with a final voters register before the election, because as we speak now, they are still on the field. And we do not even know when they are going to finish taking the names and details of Ghanaians and to go through their various processes in coming up with a final register. They published 33,000 registration centers to be conducted in 5 phases. They were to be using 6 days for each phase. The first phase took them 12 days instead of the 6 days. So you should know that they're already behind time. Here is the case that Ghana has one of the most credible voters register that any country should have in Africa. We have a biometric voters register that was compiled in 2012 and has been updated since. That register ensures that anybody who appears at a polling station will be electronically verified before the person votes, which eliminates double voting, double registration, and a whole lot. But this commission agrees with the government to throw away that register and to prepare a new register. And that is what is leading us into this whole problem. Yesterday, they started the 3rd phase, leaving out the 2nd phase. Remember, I've told you that they spent 12 days in doing what they should have done in 6 days. So the 2nd phase is outstanding. And when they started the 3rd phase yesterday, as late as 3 p.m. yesterday, many of the registration centers in Ghana did not have devices to conduct the registration exercise. And so registration centers that should have captured 200 or more registrants took, 44, some 33 names. That is obviously voter suppression. Disallowing people from coming to register by no fault of theirs. People wake up, registration centers open at 7 a.m. and closes at 6 p.m. And so if you bring the devices at 3 p.m., 4 p.m., you should know that you are going to take some 2 hours to work. So that has been our concern. So I do not believe that the Electoral Commission is really prepared for this election. But we have fought them to a stage. We have been to the Supreme Court. There has been a verdict. And we say, look, let us move on. Let us leave their failures for them to confront. When it is time for us to have a final register and the Electoral Commission cannot produce that, that will be their own issues to deal with. But the NDC is well prepared for the election.
Mm-hmm.
We have a presidential candidate. We have 275 parliamentary candidates across the country. We have recently inaugurated our national campaign team. We have our door, or the presidential candidate has named his running mate. And so by next month, we'll be coming up with our manifesto.
Mm-hmm.
So we are fully prepared. And in the midst of COVID-19, it's very difficult for people to congregate in rallies and other strategies used in political campaign mobilization.
Yes.
So we are resorting to the one-on-one campaign strategy, knocking doors and getting our men on the ground to get to people and to sell our message and to remind people of the numerous achievements of His Excellency, the former President John Mahama, and for Ghana to give him a second chance in 2020. So we are fully prepared for the elections. Even difficulties associated with conducting ourselves in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic.
And so I'm also a little bit curious. I've also heard that schools have opened in Ghana. Amidst the
yes, that's
increase.
very worrying. Very, very worrying. It is part of, for us, we believe that it is part of the rigging machinery set up by the government, because before we started the registration, suddenly schools reopened, and many, against the criticisms of teacher associations, parent associations, other civil society organizations, government still went ahead and opened the schools, only for us to hear that the Electoral Commission was now going to take kits, registration kits, to the schools to register the students. Schools that parents have been banned from visiting their wards. Now, it is now open for the Electoral Commission to assess these schools and to register the students. And also the National Youth Organizer of the ruling party also had access to secondary schools to campaign, when even parents have been prevented from going to the school. So we thought that the schools were not open in good faith. Remember that before we open, Ghana writes the WASI examination, that's the West African Secondary School Certificate Examination, together with some other West African countries. As we do this interview, many of the West African countries have pulled out from the examination, but Ghana is still on the way to write the exam and keeping the students in school in the midst of this coronavirus pandemic. And I know that maybe through your research, you would have found out that many of the students, when they went back to school, have contracted the disease. And there's some suspicion that one student died in the Ashanti region, a school in the Ashanti region, and people are attributing it to COVID-19. So the students are at risk. This morning, my party held a press conference and called for an immediate shutdown of the secondary schools to allow for the students to go home and be safe from COVID-19.
Oh, no, it's unfortunate to hear that, schools are open and a couple of kids might have contracted COVID-19. But I just want to move back to the running mate of your party. For the first time, a female has been chosen to be a running mate for a major political party in Ghana. Jane Nana is going to be the running mate of your party leader. But also, I've found out that she's a former former education minister and a university professor. She became the first female chancellor of the University of Cape Coast in 2008, according to the announcement on Mahama's Facebook page. This is what Mahama calls her: God-fearing, a distinguished scholar, and a conscious public servant, and a role model. What does it mean to have Jane Nana as your running mate, as a political party, but also in the democratization process of Ghana?
Well, I think that this was a very giant step since the Fourth Republic, running mate selection has been about regional balance, has been about religious inclusion, has been about the north-south, division of the country and how you get people to represent each of the interests. It has never been about gender. And so making that decision to have a female running mate for the NDC, I believe would have been a very tough, process for our presidential candidate. But he rose up to the occasion and named Professor Jane Nana Opoku-Agyeman as the running mate of the NDC. For us, it means that the inclusive democracy we have all been preaching over the years has been fulfilled. Women play a lot of role in our body politics. They are members of parliament who are women. We have had the first female to be a Minister of Justice and Attorney General under an NDC government. We have had the first Speaker of Parliament under an NDC government. So this for us was to upscale the NDC's gender strategy of getting everybody included in the process. And Professor Jane Nana was not chosen just because she's a woman, but because she's capable of leading this country, Ghana, in the absence of a president. You mentioned that as a former vice chancellor, and of course, the first female vice chancellor of a public university in Ghana. And now she is the president and the board chairman for the Forum for African Women Educationalists, headquartered in Nairobi, Kenya. She's also the chancellor of the Women's University in Africa based in Zimbabwe. So she's a woman of substance. She's a woman who can lead. And as we all pray that, looking at our traditional domestic setup, that we have the father, we have the mother, and how each of them contributes to the management of the home, we must also have that representation at the highest level of governance in the country. And one of our statesmen, very famous statesman in Ghana, Dr. Kwaji Agri, said that if you educate a man, you educate a single person. But if you educate a woman, you educate a whole nation. That statement was born out of our domestic setup, that women in the African setup are the persons who take care of the home. They are the people who look up to the good upbringing of our kids. And so when you educate a woman, you enlighten women to know that the home must grow through education. And so having Professor Jane Nana Opoku-Agyeman as a running mate of the NDC, for me, is a very giant step to the inclusion that we have all been preaching about. And I am very happy that various women groups and other interest groups which are interested in women empowerment have embraced the candidature of Professor Jane Nana Opoku-Agyeman. And I'm very positive that she's going to bring a lot to the ticket. And when the NDC is elected in the December elections, we all will agree that the president, former President Mahama, made a good choice for the party and for the country.
And how is gender reflected in the rest of the seats, the 270 candidates you talk about who are going to run for parliament? Have you still considered very much the women as candidates for parliament?
Exactly. We have had a strategy in the past few years of making sure that we get a lot of women representation in parliament. So, for example, our party has a regulation of giving some rebate to women candidates. So women are only allowed to pay 50% of the filing fee that everybody pays. So that brings a lot of women on board. It is also our strategy going forward at our next national Congress to find a way of reserving certain particular seats to women and ensure that women also play active role in the process. Currently, as we have it, I don't think that the representation in Parliament from both sides is anything that we should be happy about, even though it has been growing steadily. I think that we can do more than that. And that is where the nomination and selection of Professor Nana Mensah becomes, Nana Okukwuajiman becomes very loud, because her nomination now amplifies the need for women to participate in the governance process. And so it also gives the room for other political parties to look at ways of bringing women on board and looking at gender equality in the whole process. And so for me, apart from being the running mate to the NDC's presidential candidate, her candidature also speaks a lot and also, draws a path that I believe many organizations and many political parties will follow. If the NDC has been able to take this giant step, I believe that going forward, other political parties may also learn from it, and we are all going to have the women included in the process so that their voices can also be heard, so that their concerns can be taken on board going forward.
And I think for us who are working in this space are excited that you're having a running mate who is female, because we think that will send inspiration across the continent to tell politicians and political parties that, women can play an equally important role in running political parties, but also in running countries. So I think it will go a long way in inspiring the rest of the continent to give more space to women, especially because we have a lot of competent women right now. But Genfi, I want to move the conversation a little bit. I want to move the conversation a little bit and ask young people in Ghana. We have an election coming back. You have two major parties, NPP and NDC. What is their role going forward? COVID-19 spread, the spread seems to be just be increasing across Ghana. What does it mean for young people? Because they are usually the foot soldiers. They're the ones who are doing the door-to-door. They're the ones giving out the flyers. They're the ones going to the public rallies to talk about the message of the party. What does it mean for the youth participation in Ghana for this particular election?
Well, it's an important question and an important discussion to make. For us in Ghana, the youth has played very important roles in politics and in our governance process. We have had very young people taking up positions in government, taking up positions in other organizations. And even if you trace to post-independence, the president at the time was very young, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, when he became the prime minister and subsequently the president of Ghana. Our founder was around 30 years when he took up the mantle of the state in 1979. And so young people have helped contributed to the process. And as you mentioned, we have been the people who have been on the ground, the leg men, the foot soldiers, running around, making sure that posters are pasted, making sure that the messages get across to the various interest groups. And so it is important that now that we have COVID-19, how do we get young people still involved in the process in a very healthy manner so that people, young people do not go to the field to contract the deadly COVID-19 disease? Or how do we still get young people interested in the process and not be scared by the deaths and the numbers as it is going up? It is our responsibility as young people, and I have worked with young people when I served as the regional youth organizer for my party in Ashanti Region. And I aspired to be the national youth leader. unfortunately, I lost in the process. So I know the role that young people play in this whole process. And so I think that we must move the conversation to the doorstep of young people to recognize the need to protect themselves, to see how deadly it is to contract the COVID-19. And I think that various social marketers in the country are helping in propagating the preventive measures for COVID-19 so that we take it more seriously. And as we get into the election and a lot of young people get involved in the process, we must not stop, because the future belongs to us. And I've heard some people even say that we are the future and the future is today. Whatever decisions are taken today would have some implications for us in the future. Mm-hmm. And so why should we not be part of the process and to determine what happens to the country when we have become older and we look up to the younger generation? So I will advise that all young persons must take coronavirus very seriously. We must not joke with it. And that is why my party is very much concerned about the reopening of schools and allowing these young persons to go through this trauma. We're going to write an examination and, looking at your back and seeing who is coming to you with coronavirus and all of that is not a good, atmosphere to run our students through. Mm-hmm. And so, coming back to your question, what I would say is that young people have a role to play, and we must play the role in a very conducive manner in taking all the safety precautions along and ensuring that we don't play our role as we have been doing and end up contracting COVID-19. There's this notion that COVID-19 does not kill young people. I want anybody who is listening to me today to disabuse our minds of that conspiracy theory being thrown at us. I have read about young people dying from COVID-19. We are also human beings. We may also have other health underlying health conditions. And when we are attacked by COVID-19, it is very difficult to survive in that situation.
Genfi, again, keeping to the conversation of young people, there's one particular worry I have across the African continent. You mentioned Kwame Nkrumah and Jerry Rawlings. When they took power, they were young people, but it seems that within this particular generation, everyone who aspires to be president seems to be a generation of older people, late 50s, their 60s, early 70s. We seem to be losing what happened at independence when the Nkrumahs took power. I mean, isn't this a conversation that we need to start having? Why aren't we having running mates or presidential candidates who are in their 30s or even their mid-40s? What is happening? And of course, there are conversations about the cost of elections, which have been monetized, that make it difficult for young people to be able to participate in a meaningful way. What do we need to do to bring down the age of presidential candidates? Because we think that people like you have the potential to run countries. We need to create the spaces to be able to have young people who are professional and have the skills to run the country. The generational gap between those who are running for president and the young people is so huge.
I think I agree with you. It's a concern that we have all been talking about for some time now. And I watched a video of Mo Ibrahim in a discussion. I'm sure you would have chanced upon that. Who said that, where are the old men leading us to? Are they leading us to the grave? It's a discussion we must have. Yeah. But we cannot have that discussion without conscientizing young people to be involved in the process, in the governance process, in the political process. Yes, the various political parties in Africa have done many things to promote young people in leadership. But when it comes to the number one position as leading the party into an election to become a president, then it becomes very difficult. In my country, for example, in Ghana, you must be 40 years and above to be able to contest for as president. So you see the barrier to young people getting in there. Of course, if you are 21 years and above, you can contest for a parliamentary seat. But to be able to contest as a presidential candidate, you must be 40 years and above. That's a huge barrier for young people in getting to that stage. So it is something that we must confront with. And I have seen many advocates started, advocating for the presidential age to be lowered to say 35 or 32. And I agree that we must allow for young people who are capable, who may even be able to raise enough resources on their own to run a presidential campaign, to also get that opportunity to do so. As much as we fight the psychological aspect of it, there's also the legal and the legislative barriers that we need to fight. So if you have a parliament that has an average age of, say, 45 and 70 years, then it becomes very difficult to drive that advocacy and get them to agree to make the necessary changes. But once we continue to push,
Hello, Genfi, is still there?
I'm sure that we will get there in the near future, rising up to steer.
Genfi, in my country, to run for president was from 35 years, and recently we reduced it to 18 years. So if you are a Ugandan citizen and you're a registered voter and you have the capacity to run for president, 18 years you can run for president. So we have 18-year-olds threatening to run for president, 19-year-olds threatening to run for parliament. I think a couple of years ago, we also had a 19-year-old member of parliament who was female, and she ran in a constituency that is traditionally a male's domain. So I think it is possible. The opportunities exist. The examples and the precedents exist. So Ghana can send a delegation. When NDC takes power, you need to send a delegation to Kampala to be able to learn some lessons on changing the constitution to accommodate young people. But also Genfi, young people.
It's a very good example. Yeah.
But Genfi, young people and those running for parliament, how are the numbers across the political divide? Do you have a critical mass of young people who have attempted to run as parliamentary candidates in these upcoming elections?
Yes. I may not be able to put figures to it because the Electoral Commission has not opened nomination for the political parties to file their candidates, even though we have gone through our various primaries. And observing how the primaries went, I saw many young people coming up in leadership position at that level. My party has a lot of young people serving as candidates in the various constituencies. I also witnessed the parliamentary primaries of the ruling party, and we saw many young people removing incumbent, if you describe them, older parliamentarians and representing their parties at that level. I am very optimistic that we would have a very young parliament going forward into 2020. There has been, some improvement over the years, getting young people on board. And apart from that, also getting young people involved in the executive encourages more of these persons to want to join the legislature. In 2009, when we came back to office with the late Professor Mills and Vice President John Mahama, many young people got the opportunity to be deputy ministers and headed some governmental institutions, and many of them got their way to parliament. Before we came live, you were referring to an article by the minority spokesperson on foreign affairs, Honorable Samuel Okudzeto-Ablakwa. He was a very young person when he was appointed Deputy Minister of Information, still young, and then he's also in Parliament now. So I believe that we are doing well. We are doing well, even though we can do more than we have now. But the Ugandan example of having 18-year-olds running for president, I think is a very good example that the whole of African continent must learn. And many Ghanaians who are watching this conversation, I'm sure will be inspired to join the advocacy to break that presidential age limit, which excludes young people from getting to the highest level to make decisions for this country. Decisions that young people are those that will grow to live with, you know.
And I mean, Genfi, for us in Uganda, we have decided.
When we as young people also grow.
Genfi, for us in Uganda, we have decided that if I can vote, then I can run for any position. If I can vote, I can run for any position, and that is 18 years. And that should inspire the rest of the continent to lower the age for running for president. But Genfi, as we wrap up, as we begin to wrap up the conversation, I don't know whether are you still with me? Genfi seems to be having a technical glitch there. But the NPP and NDC over the last 15 to 20 years has been changing power between themselves, each of them going into opposition and then back to government. And we know that Ghana has cemented its reputation as a leading democracy in West Africa and the rest of Africa. Are you with me? Oh, you can hear me. Okay. I was saying that Ghana has cemented its reputation as a leading democracy in the western part of Africa, given the notoriety for political instability in some of the West African countries. And we are watching this election and hoping that you're going to keep the spirit with which the rest of us hold you as a country and maintain the democratization growth that inspires the rest of the continent. But your final word, Genfi, to the Electoral Commission of Ghana, to the young people across the continent, but also to the young people within NDC.
Yes, I agree with your statement before the question that Ghana has always led the way in terms of political stability, in terms of even gaining independence in sub-Saharan Africa. And we must continue to build on it. And that's what we have been doing since the Fourth Republic. We are all praying that with the track that we are on now, it is very dangerous for our democracy. And we are praying that our 73, 74-year-old president will not draw us back from all the gains that have been made since the Fourth Republic was established. And that is why anytime there is anything that undermines our democracy, the opposition rise up to the occasion to defend and to ensure that the status quo remains. Nothing is changed in order to manipulate the elections, in order to tilt the process to the advantage of the ruling party. Election rigging takes, through many processes, through voter registration, through campaigning, and all of that. Last week, the information minister announced that government is considering a possibility of locking down the country after the voter registration exercise. That obviously is in bad taste, was not made in good faith, is to prevent political activities and to ensure that the president has the media space to himself with his usual addresses, which mostly do not communicate anything. And if you are going to take Ghanaians through the risk of queuing for hours and not observing social distancing and physical distancing through more than 1 month of voter registration exercise, then if you communicate to the country that once after that exercise, we are going to lock down the country, then it means that you have something up your sleeves that many other persons do not know. And so my message to the Electoral Commission is that, yes, she was appointed by the current president, but the Constitution gives the Electoral Commission independence in terms of its operations, in terms of its direction, and in terms of its decisions. The Electoral Commission must ensure that the 2020 elections is free and fair from any manipulative authority to undermine our democracy. That would be very bad example for us, and her name will be written in the books of history as the one who took this country on that line. And we in the opposition are not ready to sacrifice that image that many of you in the other countries of the continent, see Ghana and cherish that political image, that governance image, and that achievement that Ghana has achieved over the years. We are going to safeguard it, and we are going to match the Electoral Commission and ensure that whatever they do is within the mandate of the laws given them. For example, this issue about taking registration kits to secondary schools to risk the lives of our junior brothers and sisters at the secondary schools. The Electoral Commission is not working according to any laws. The electoral laws concerned with registration indicates that before the Electoral Commission opens any registration center, they must have gazetted that polling center for 21 days, which is 3 weeks. The Electoral Commission only took a night of informing political parties that, look, tomorrow morning, meet me at the various secondary schools. I'm taking my registration kits to register them. Instead of physically and violently preventing the Electoral Commission, we have decided to go to court for the court to annul all those persons that were captured through that exercise. I think that is very commendable. Party that is really other countries, you would not have the opportunity to say, my God, take this decision for us. If there's the will of the people to physically prevent, the Electoral Commission must, untie its apron from that of the ruling party so that we can all build the confidence going forward. And to young people, I would say that let us all participate in the process. The decisions that are made today are made for us in the future. And as we engage in this political game, we must know that tomorrow we will be the older generation and there will be other younger generation looking up to us. If we pull the chain of violent activities, of many other unnecessary behavior, if we pull that chain, we will be older and we'll look back and see younger people who have come after us holding that chain. At that point, we may not have the strength to walk back and cut it. And those people look up to us. And so our words of change may not be able to change that trajectory that we have established. And so we, as young people, must walk our ways through ensuring that we have a peaceful country, we have a peaceful Ghana, we have a peaceful continent. Good evening to all Pan-Africanists and to all people who support the African agenda. And thank you for giving me the opportunity, Emmy. Greetings to everybody on the continent.
Genfi, thank you very much, especially today for the message to young people across the continent. We have an election coming up in Tanzania in October. We have an election coming up in February in Uganda. We have an election coming up in Zambia. And the message is clear that young people must keep peace. Young people must be part of this process, but participate responsibly, but also provide the necessary support to your respective political parties. And that we must respect each other. We all come from different political persuasions, but all our interest is the same. We want a better Ghana. We want a better Uganda. We want a better Africa. So thank you very much, Genfi. It was an honor having you, and we wish you all the best. We wish NDC the best in the December 7th election. We also hope that the COVID-19 spread, the curve goes down in Ghana, and that we hope that the Electoral Commission has heard you loud and clear, that they must work very hard to make sure that the election is credible and reflects the will of the people of Ghana. Thank you very much, Genfi, and have a splendid afternoon.
Thank you for having me on Distinct Talks.
Okay, thank you. That was Genfi, a big supporter of NDC and a member of the NDC, National Democratic Congress in Ghana, talking to us about the preparations of the electoral process, the Electoral Commission, the preparations of the National Democratic Congress, and the role of the young people in this upcoming election. And his message is clear: be part of the process. If you want your voice to be heard, be part of the process. Come as a candidate, come and participate as a volunteer within your political party, or in any way that adds value to the process. Violence is not going to make your country better. It won't make your political party better. So we implore all young people across the continent, especially those countries where we have elections coming up, that it is important to observe peace. It is important to be part of a process that respects the rest of the candidates, and that let's run clean campaigns. It was a great honor having Genfi from the National Democratic Congress, a party that was founded in 1992 by His Excellency Jerry Rawlings, and their presidential candidate right now, John Mahama, decided to nominate a first female running mate, a university professor, to be part of this historic election, where she is the first female running mate of a major political party in Ghana. And our message to the rest of the continent is that it is possible, like Ghana, to have a peaceful election. It is possible, like Ghana, to have transitions that are not bloody. It is possible, like Ghana, to be able to have an election that is credible and accepted by the rest of the community, the country. And we implore that for the rest of the African countries that are going to be running elections. This was Distinct Talks, and your host, Emmy, Otim. And this session was powered by the Christian Democratic International Center, which is a party foundation based in Stockholm, running programs in Europe, Latin America, and East Africa. You can now go on our YouTube channel, Distinct Talks, and follow the conversations, because after every session, we upload all the videos on Distinct Talks on YouTube. It was an honor having all of you following this conversation, and we hope that it added value to you, your political party, and the rest of the country. Thank you all very much, and have a splendid evening.